Consider this, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bale Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hi, and welcome back to UNO. My guest this week is someone who's had a lot to reflect on the last week or so. His name is Steve Ocapole. And that may not be a household word, but to Democrats, it's a well-known name. Steve is chairman of the Nebraska State Democratic Party. And you look in pretty good shape.
Well, I feel
considering
just
November's.
fine. I feel just fine. We're upbeat, and we're moving forward.
A lot of people are looking back in Nebraska, and there are some good news stories to tell for the Democrats. You held on to South Dakota Senate seat, certainly Iowa with the governor and Tom Harkin, but we still look at Nebraska, and it was not a good election day for Democrats.
No, we got clobbered. I mean, there's no other way to put it. We got
You're such a nice guy. I didn't want to hit with clobbered out of the chute.
We had an expectation that we were not going to do well. We didn't expect that we would do quite as poorly as we did, but there's no getting around it. We just got plain clobbered.
I'm one of those people that believes a two-party system is good for this country, at a minimum of a two-party system, but a strong two-party system at minimum. And so I think there's a feeling now in Nebraska, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, that the Democrats are in a bit of not just disarray. From the grassroots efforts, those campaign coordinating kinds of things, the heart of the Democratic Party has always been.
Well, some of that is true, but some of it's not true, and I think there's a misperception as to which direction we're going. We are not nearly as well funded as the Republicans, there's no doubt about it. We are not nearly as well organized as the Republicans are, there's no doubt about it. But there are some bright spots. I mean, we have the two mayors in the two largest cities, obviously, Lincoln and Omaha. We have a sitting United States senator. We have some very effective state legislators. Joe Higgins won on the State Board of Education. Other Democrats did, in fact, win. And the fact of the matter is, we knew this was going to be a difficult election back a year or year and a half ago. And I think that's one of the reasons why some of the people that we have in our cupboard for future elections stayed out of this election. There are a lot of great Democrats out there and who are interested in running for office in the future. So I don't think things are as bleak as they may appear.
So your pantry isn't empty?
It certainly isn't. I mean, we have some great state legislators who actually were up for re-election this year.
Keneally and Bourne
are perfect examples. There are other Democrats in the state legislature that will run for higher office. Certainly we have some of the old stalwarts. John Kavanaugh, I think, may have a future. And the other thing that we have is that we ran primarily in our statewide races first-time candidates. And when they started out in their campaigns, first of all, they got started too late, and that's a problem of the state party. We didn't do an effective job of recruiting. When they started out, they weren't very effective campaigners, and they would be the first ones to say that. But I'll tell you, anybody that saw Stormy Dean at the end of the campaign, listened to him speak, knew that he was a formidable contender, and honestly, the governor was running away from him. He didn't want to encounter him. He didn't want to engage him because I think most people who watched Stormy's campaign in the late stages knew that he was better equipped to deal with the issues than the governor was. Now, he didn't get elected, and we fall back as citizens and we come together and we support our governor who was elected when we can, and we offer constructive criticism when we can't. But my point is that Stormy Dean has a great future, and he's going to be a darn better campaigner, and he's going to be a much more effective candidate in the future.
He certainly, after the election, when asked about certain situations, or maybe he told some stories about how it was a little bleak when he would go outside of Omaha and Lincoln, and that the party structure just didn't seem to be there. But he didn't tell tales out of school in terms of a bitterness or a anger. He's still talking about working with the party and trying to build the party.
Sure is.
And he was quite adamant about that.
Stormy's a team player, and he's committed himself to the party. His wife was very active in his campaign. She's committed himself. His organization is committed itself to the state party, and we're going to help build. The same thing goes for our other candidates who ran. I don't think amongst the new candidates that we had there's any divisiveness. There's certainly a sadness about how everything turned out, but there's also a real strength and resolve to make things better in our state, and maybe we needed this kind of thing as a wake-up call.
It goes without saying anymore in modern day politics that money is necessary. And you mentioned that you're not as well funded as the Republicans, but the bottom line is that in states even like South Dakota, millions and millions of dollars were spent to win statewide campaigns, and that will be required to win statewide campaigns in the future, be you Democrat, Republican, or anybody else that may happen to garner enough support.
Well, that's one of the things that hobbled us, because we didn't have much money coming in to the Democrats from out of state, from the national committees that are associated with the Democratic national committees, and there's no doubt about it that in particular that hurt Jim Simon. I mean, that's certainly one of our problems, but I think the bright side of it is that we're starting to identify a whole group of people out there that have never really been targeted for things like fundraising, for things like volunteer activities. The State Democratic Party has traditionally been a candidate-driven organization. And one of our plans is to make it a more autonomous organization so that it's not just here for the 6 months before an election and then goes into a state of hibernation in the next year. We want to make the State Democratic Party an organization that continues on and is active all of the time in doing fundraising and in bringing its volunteers together, in getting out its message and doing all of the things that a state political party should be doing.
Okay, let's move back in time. And you mentioned that the Democratic Party, at least in this state, has been traditionally candidate-driven. And I think we can look back at the real success stories of the Democratic Party in the last 50 years and see that those were personality or candidate-driven.
Right.
However, maybe it's just as you get older and the memory beyond always seems a little better or more mellow, that the Democrats, some of their the things that really kept them going, even in bad times, were that they had a very good grassroots connection, that they were organized on the precinct level, the lower levels, that they were connected to things like labor, which sort of deserted you, or just laid low this last election. And so, I guess your response, I'm mentioning a couple of things here, but let's talk about that grassroots. The voter registration was always a strong Democratic thing, long before the Republicans really jumped on that.
We had we have currently a 150,000 voter registration disadvantage in the state of Nebraska.
Yeah, the Republicans have doubled theirs in the last 10 years.
We had that. We were on pretty good footing back in the early 90s. The Republican Party back then was in a state of disarray.
Yes.
Relative recent history.
To be fair.
I like to remind my counterpart Dave Kramer about that. But the fact of the matter is we need to get about the business of registering voters. Bob Kerrey energized Democrats in this state. Ben Nelson, to some extent, has energized voters in this state. But the negative of a departure of Bob Kerrey, of the likes of a Bob Kerrey, is something that we're dealing with now. Bob Kerrey had developed a very strong statewide organization, which was not well tended when he departed. And as a result of that, we are now situated where we don't have nearly the kind of statewide organization as the Republicans do, because Mike Johans has been out there pounding the pavement since he was the mayor of Lincoln to develop a very effective statewide organization for his own purposes. In fact, we really fault the governor and remind voters that when he was mayor of Lincoln, he spent a lot of his time running for governor. And we hope that now that he's got a $600 and some odd million budget deficit, that he doesn't spend the next 4 years running for his next political office, which people are speculating is the U.S. Senate, instead of minding and tending to the store of the state government. But the disadvantage that we have is that this past time is that we were running against the likes of Senator Hagel and Governor Johans, who had developed very effective statewide organizations, and we simply didn't have the statewide organization or the remnants of one left over to compete on an effective basis with them. And this gets back to my point about party autonomy. We need to have that statewide organization in place, whether or not we have a very glamorous and
or energetic
popular
or
energetic
charismatic
office holder or statewide candidate, and that's how we can bring stability to the Democratic Party politics and politics in general in this state if we can implement that kind of a plan, and that's what we're about the task of doing.
Well, one thing that you mentioned, Governor Johans and the possible Senate run would be against Ben Nelson.
Mm-hmm.
But we have a thing in the interim, because that won't happen for 4 years. We know Ben, will come up for re-election. I'm assuming he will. Whether Johans runs against him or not, we'll find out. But we have something coming up in the meantime, and that's called another presidential election. Mm-hmm. And we do have, being next to Iowa, we do get some of that afterglow of the candidates coming through here. Isn't that a good opportunity to get some energy back into the party?
It sure is, and we're already taking advantage of that.
They'll be coming in soon.
We've got they've already been here, and some of them have. One in particular has already slept in my house. So you raise a very interesting point. There's going to be a lot of activity, and Nebraska is in a real opportune position to take advantage of that and stimulate a lot of political activity. We can do some fundraising from that. We can reach out to some of our constituencies, and we can repair some of the fractures that have developed in our party. You mentioned labor. I wouldn't call that a fracture, but certainly it's a relationship which deserves our improving and working on. So yes, we have a lot of opportunities coming up, and that's really the way we're looking at this. Let me just say this. When I took over as the state Democratic Party chairman back a little over a year ago.
Right, and I should have mentioned early on that you've only been at the helm for a year.
And when we took over, we faced a financial crisis in our state party. We were over $100,000 in the red. We were facing, in addition to that, a substantial fine from the Political Accountability and Disclosure Commission. We have now turned our financial picture around, and we're well into the black. And I might say that we're paying off in a very responsible way this problem that we had in terms of a simple mistake that was made 2 years ago that we were fined for. So there are a lot of positives coming out of the Democratic Party. We're developing an ability to deliver a message. We're working on our media. We're trying to reach out to traditional constituencies, some of whom that have never been reached out to in this state, to deliver the message out there that we support their goals, we support what they're about, and we're willing to be partners with them in moving forward. And that's also a piece to it.
Let me get back to labor for just a minute. I don't want to belabor the point, but when you have not quite scores, maybe around a score of labor unions that are backing a Republican candidate for governor, and some major unions that are just standing, by the wayside in the gubernatorial race, like the NEA and the state AFL-CIO, I believe. What message does that give out? Let alone all the feet and the hands that endorsements always have provided the Democratic Party.
Well,
What does that say?
I think that this election was peculiar in a sense. We had a very popular sitting governor who had done some things for organized labor in this state. And if you know labor people, they're very loyal, they're very good people, and they're very loyal people.
Were promises made?
You'd have to ask the labor people that, and you'd have to ask the governor that. But the governor also found himself in a position of having the pleasure of defining the debate on how to tackle the budget shortfall that we currently are confronted with. And obviously, teachers, for example, are very interested in which direction that goes. And looking at the political landscape, probably found themselves on the horns of a Hobbesian choice. Either we support the Democratic candidate, or we and run the risk of being punished when the money is meted out in tackling the budget crisis, or do we take a more reticent approach and maybe stay out and sit this one out or something like that? And I think the decisions were made not so much as a slap at the Democratic Party. The decisions were made on the basis of what some of the political realities were that confronted everybody in the last election. And I think I think you can't examine that situation without examining things kind of on a case-by-case basis. I mean, Joe Higgins was elected to the State Board of Education. Joe Higgins had the support of organized labor. There were people elected to the Metro Community College Board that were supported by a lot of the Democratic candidates were supported, and there was, the situation in the governor's race that we all know about.
So it was a pragmatic. Let's take the NEA for example. I can't tell. I'm not familiar enough with the building trades and who gets what and how contracts are handed out. So, but the dilemma that you mentioned that they were in is that things looked pretty good for Governor Joe.
Sure,
Manchin.
and it's really important for Democrats to understand that the choices were made on these occasions not because these were not good Democratic people who believed in democratic values, but because of some very important reasons important concerns that they had about the people that they represented, the teachers.
Let me ask you about Stormy Dean. He's obviously, his heart was in the campaign. He worked very hard, but he had a financial problem. He had to cut back his staff. He seemed to grapple to find some issues. Gambling he kind of glommed onto, and then of course he did try to get the state shortfall and what he perceived as the lack of governor's leadership in anticipating and
the fact that we've cut Medicaid when very few states did.
To children, yes.
The fact that we've bungled grants that we could have had from the federal government that we didn't get.
The one for AIDS in particular,
and
AIDS patients.
There were others.
But it didn't seem much like the national Democratic agenda, which did go to the hearts of those kinds of things. Grants for indigent or ill or needy groups, the Medicaid issue, those are kind of bread and butter issues. And nationally, the prescription drugs, Social Security, those kinds of things, they didn't seem to have the taking power. They didn't stick.
Well, on the national level, there are a lot of people that say the Democrats had the same problem. One of the things that affected the campaign here in Nebraska was what happened on the national scene. And
it has 4 letters, I think.
That's what?
I think it has 4 letters. IRAQ.
That's right.
Part of it.
That's right. The Bush administration did a very effective job of seizing the agenda and seizing the publicity. In mid-year, the polling was showing that the Democrats' position nationally on the kitchen table issues you just mentioned, prescription drugs, Social Security, education, and the like, were gaining foothold. And the polling was showing that people that George Bush's national security position was not having a spillover effect on what people thought on the domestic issues.
So the 9/11 aura was starting to fade.
And then out of the clear blue, all of a sudden, Saddam Hussein becomes someone that we need to address immediately, and it's an imminent problem, and that grabbed the headlines. And I'm not criticizing the administration for that. I'm just suggesting that was another odd circumstance that led to the problems that Democrats had on the national scene, and it had an effect for us here in Nebraska. Stormy Dean in particular, I think too much was made of the gambling question, and not enough was made of the real problem that we face here. We've got a $650 or $60 or $80, it's probably more than that now, $1 million deficit Governor Johans was handed a $500 million surplus when he was elected back in 1998, and the question is, what are we going to do about that? And that's going to have dramatic consequences to the citizens of the state of Nebraska. Now, Stormy Dean was offering a plan. He was offering an alternative, and it wasn't a very, unfortunately, it wasn't a very sexy issue, and I acknowledge that. But so the press turned to gambling, and when the petition initiative was taken off the table by the Nebraska Supreme Court, that caused some problems. There's no doubt about it.
You know, I would not presume to Monday morning quarterback any politician who worked as hard as he did, or most of the politicians that ran for office this time were very hard workers. But the Democrats who counted on those bread and butter issues, I mean, anytime you count on an issue that's traditionally yours, situational politics can, you know, just put water on it and, you know, dampen the whole thing. How do you anticipate, though, the fact that that isn't going to happen again?
Well, I'm sure it will happen. Number one, we'll be smarter. You know, I'm a first-year state chair, and I had many failings myself. The state party had many failings. I think we can anticipate it. I think Democrats, I think the lesson of this last election is that Democrats need to make sure that they don't have the agenda taken away from them, number one. Number two, Democrats need to speak with a unified voice on these issues. When the Iraq issue came up, the Democrats, frankly, were not speaking with a unified voice. So we had this major question that all of a sudden hit the national scene. The Republicans were unified. The Democrats on the national scene, frankly, were not unified.
But the question is how, and I mean, this is any party when you're working at a strategy, is the leadership has to decide under what banner to unify. Sure, the Democrats will probably lean this way, but it's how you sort of frame it and how you, you know, you bring in the people from in the whole tent. Right now, in this day that we're taping, the House of Representatives, the Democrats there have elected their new leader, the first woman to
Nancy Pelosi.
To head a party. She's considered a liberal.
Yes.
So when you look at Nebraska and being the head of the Democratic Party and knowing that she's going to have a hand in setting the agenda and the message for 2004, what would you like to tell her? Well,
Nancy Pelosi is, we use too many labels in politics. Nancy Pelosi has been labeled as a liberal, but she's a very practical, common sense, very astute political, has a very astute political sense about her. There are a whole world of issues out there, Carol, that the Democrats need to start focusing on and delivering a unified message about. Take prescription drugs, for example. If you talk to any senior about, there are seniors in the state of Nebraska who have to decide whether they're going to buy groceries or they're going to buy their prescription drugs. We did not do an effective job of saying that the Republicans' plan that passed the House of Representatives earlier this year is an empty promise to the seniors.
In fact, the Republicans who worried about that issue did a very good job of
confusing it.
Of confusing our senior citizens and their offspring that are worried.
That's precisely correct, and we got into these long, drawn-out explanations of the fact that the coverage was layered. And all of this, and the Democrats also got the message somewhat confused, and we didn't get down to talking about the real issue, which is, are we going to let the drug companies who are interested in profits set the prices, or are we going to let the government set the prices and control and try to minimize for the constituents, the seniors, what they're going to be paying for prescription drugs? That's an essential, important issue.
But don't both national parties at least have enough money? I know the Republicans have a lot, and the Democrats certainly have proven in the past that they have the power to raise money. Don't they all have the resources to find the right pollsters and the right creative minds to figure out how to focus? I mean,
oh, sure.
Come on, this
sure.
knowledge is out there.
And I'll tell you, the knowledge 6 months ago or 9 months ago was that those kinds of issues, and there were others. We can talk about privatizing Social Security, which the Republicans wanted to do. It's unclear what they want to do now. We can talk about education reform and whether the Republicans' education plan is really a meaningful one. We can talk about all those issues. Those were gaining foothold, and it's the meat and potatoes, kitchen table issues that people in the long run are going to want to hear about. And that all got bollocksed up by the war on Iraq, which is very important. I'm not minimizing it, and 9/11.
And then somewhere in there was the sniper. I mean,
right.
So that airtime
Right.
that both parties sort of rely on to maybe position their issues in the first 5 minutes of a national newscast.
That's right. By gosh, though, if you're a senior, my mother is really interested in what it costs her to obtain her prescription drugs. Teachers in this state are very interested in what they're going to be paid and what kind of curriculum they're going to be teaching. People are interested in making sure that Social Security is going to be there and not necessarily be privatized. And on and on and on we go with the issues. These are important issues. We just need to have a stronger and louder message and a more coherent message than the Republicans do.
You know, you'll get another opportunity, or many opportunities over the next couple of years, not just with regard to that presidential afterglow spin-off that we get here, but certainly in local elections to build where traditionally we go back to the beginning, and I'm not trying to harp on it, but we're in the precincts and the foot soldiers that the Democrats have been so successful at over the years. I mean, that's what made the so-called Democratic machines.
We've got to build on that. We've got to build on our get out the vote efforts, and we failed in this election. We're now trying to assess where exactly where we failed, but we're working on things like getting hold of a big telephone system that will be able to telephone, get out the message in terms of our telephone campaigns. We're working on volunteer groups. We're working on organizing and strengthening our county parties. So when Stormy Dean goes out to North Platte,
he doesn't sit on the porch by himself waiting for people to show up.
We're working on all of those things because they need to be worked on.
Well, one thing that needs to be worked on is wrapping up this show because we run out of time, which you're probably happy about. But you're a good sport to come on here, and you've got a year under your belt, and we all learn.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I look forward to coming on here in a year or maybe 2 years.
Oh, we'll get you back before 2 years.
And talking about where we've made it to.
All right, and I'm sure you'd love to hear from anyone that would like to help you in the next year or so.
That's exactly right.
Well, thank you so much, Steve Ocapole, Chairman of the Nebraska Democratic Party. Thank you for joining us, and remember, unotv.unomaha.edu. Check up on our shows, past and today's show. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.